Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, self-control. 9. Maybe like this. 9 fruits of the Spirit. That's what it's all about. For the human life, in a sense. If you got either of those, you're having a good life. I thought about mentioning, because I'm actually reading through Proverbs, King Solomon Proverbs, about how to have a good life, how to live a good life, how to... and actually, I found something interesting, that it reaffirmed my the intuitive knowing that was kind of showing itself in my heart throughout the life as I was growing older. And I kind of wanted to follow that, and I kind of felt that it was the right thing to do, but because I didn't have anyone around me who was actually living it, talking about it, affirming it, it was so hard to do it. Like, because there was no verbalization of it, talking about it, that I started doubting that it's maybe not so, because no one around me kind of lived like that. And that was weird, because it didn't feel true not to follow it. And I kind of, to be honest, throughout my life, I kind of relied on it, literally as if it was the root, and I was the leaf, the vine, that was the vine, and that was the fruit. And now reading that in the Bible, a story that is the Bible, and the explanation for our kind of being here, it just clicks, it just makes sense, it just speaks to the aspects of me that was kind of starved through being too much aware of what was going around me, rather than fully trusting what was going inside of me. And as I'm reading it, it seems like, oh yes, obviously that's the way. Obviously that is the way to live a good life, to be just, to act righteously, to be humble, to not to do this and do that, in a sense, not to do the evil things and do the right things. And I don't know if it's only me, but I feel like it can be, because it has to be like more people has to have that sense of inherent naturalness of doing the right thing and being good and being right, being in the right, not in the sense of I'm being in the right, but being there's a right way to do it, and walking that path, and in that sense being in the right. And I just thought about sharing that, because it's so, in a way, ridiculous that it's not promoted. I don't know why, it makes no sense. I mean, I can see now that it's more promoted, that when I was growing up, maybe it was due to, maybe it was always available, it was just not available to me or to the place where I lived, and I'm still not sure about why, in a sense. Maybe I wasn't, because I was brought up in a Catholic faith, and but it was more of a label kind of Catholic faith, and not practiced Catholic faith, which then would be Christianity. It's just, I wanted to share it, because as I'm learning it, it kind of rattles my mind, in a sense, because things I thought were obvious were kind of shown me that they're not obvious. And even though I wasn't much on following certain ways of behaving, because they didn't agree with what was in my heart, but then my parents wanted me to go to school, and the school and teachers and so on and so forth, and so many things didn't make sense why the things are as they are, but they are as they are. So I was like, okay, apparently people well been here before, although that also didn't sit well with me, because it was like the inner knowing of what is right, but then the evidence outside seemed so overwhelmingly bigger than I just very slowly, and I don't even say that it was eroded, because I don't feel that that's within us can be eroded. It was me kind of slightly moving towards, well, maybe I'm just wrong, or maybe there's something wrong with my inner understanding or inner guidance, because like, well, so many people are not actually doing that and they seem to be okay, but like I wasn't verbalizing it, and it's not exactly as I'm saying right now, because could be just me faltering and stumbling along the way of like, hold on, that doesn't make sense. And then the trauma and stuff like that, and yeah, I thought just about sharing it, because it's so, after being on a journey through into spirituality and looking for the answers and looking for them in all sorts of traditions and religions, and even now like being taught Greek mythology of kings and of gods and so on and so forth, even loving the film Hercules and the movie, is like I did lack the comprehension that the guy on the telly, which was just amazingly, strong and so on, doing the right thing, was I always felt like if you're doing the right thing, it cannot come from any other source than one true God. It somehow was lodged in me like this. I don't know, it was a gift of God or something like that. And even though it seems like even though things were presented not in a clear way, there was something within which stood guard of that. And I'm not saying I always kind of trusted it and so on and follow it, because I didn't. But something within me knew the truth. And now going through all the lessons in school and different traditions and learning psychology, hypnosis, how the mind works, modern science, New Age, going through the New Age, through yoga tradition, through Buddhism, Taoism, and different sects of Buddhism, and different aspects of Hinduism, and being quite, to be honest, a fan of Tao Te Ching at some point. Like when I read it, I was like, oh, I read it, and I have no idea, well, that's not entirely true. I didn't exactly understood what did I read, but it was one of the best read I ever had, in a sense, because it answers some questions about spiritual awakening, but it didn't answer it full. And now, after many years of spiritual wilderness, I came to read the Bible, and there were forces at play which actually kept me away from reading the Bible. Maybe it was spiritual pride, maybe it was arrogance, maybe it was punishment from God, in a sense, or I'm not even sure if God punishes us. I think it's our mistakes turn around and kick us in the butt, and we attribute it to God because the God's law is unchangeable, and if we do wrong, the wrong's going to come back to us. So technically we could say that God punishes us, but practically practically we might say that, but technically it's not quite right to say. It's just the laws and the nature of God is such that if we do make a mistake, even unconsciously, then we're going to reap the benefits of it, even though they're bitter. So in a way you could say that God's doing that, but it depends what you mean behind it. If you mean that like God is actually, as a human, like going out of his way doing that, that's not the case. It's more of that's the nature of God, and if we don't understand it, it doesn't matter, because we're gonna be reaping the negative benefits of it, but now it's understanding that we don't want to reap the negative benefits, we want to reap the positive benefits. And we always wanted to reap the positive benefits. It's just the forces of evil kind of, which the only kind of weapon they have is to twist the truth. So the truth is one thing, and then the evil cannot do any other thing than try to twist it and change it and alter it, which then kind of makes sense. And reading the Bible helped me to understand it like no other text. Even I was fascinated with, I guess the most, with Tao Te Ching and Zen Buddhism and Conversation with God and Eckhart Tolle, which now I understand is omitting certain things that are really key points, mainly the Jesus and what he did and how it is seen, although I don't have full clarity on it yet. I'm still on a journey, so and weirdly enough, I didn't sit down here to talk about what I'm talking about, yet I'm talking about it because I gave myself a kind of challenge to read through the Bible, and I started like a month ago or something like that. I'm not sure exactly when, but I'm like halfway through it, and another thing which I understood was picking off fragments from the Bible and trying to fit them in my own understanding didn't work and can't work and won't work. And you have to read it as if the whole story and take all the components of it into consideration for it to make sense. And even though you might not agree with it and you might have some objections, to read through it and to go with it and to accept it for what it is. And in that sense, it makes much more sense. And there's a wisdom in how it is written that even it can sip through even the hardened kind of shells that the human being can kind of put up with, and the fear can kind of offer for us to use as a defense, which ultimately doesn't work because it's a trick. It's an enemy's trick, and it's a false idea, and it doesn't work, and it never worked because only the God has the power of God, and that's about it. And even though the energy of God can surge through you, it doesn't mean that you're God in a sense. And how I understood it, at most we can, I feel like the most we can say is like, I and Father are one. But that's like the pinnacle of what one can do in the most humble way. And even that has to be you have to be super diligent and observant not to make a mistake, and to be honest with it as it is happening. And then when it is happening, you know that you can't really claim it as your ego, because then your ego, the separate you, is already based on life. So whatever you as an ego, or me as an ego, or whatever that aspect of myself which seems to be already based on a separation from God can come up with, it can't solve the issue because it's already based on the lie. So, and the truth is quite different than that. And the truth is that the God is the source, the lawful authority of all creation, quite literally. And for the ego, it doesn't make sense to say that. I know even now saying that, it's still part of me which quite like, it doesn't make sense in a sense. But I know it does. I have faith that it does. And I know that I know that I know. And that's also a gift. And I thought about sharing it because and believe me that I spend a lot of time reflecting and pondering and wondering about life and what matters and what not, and what's the point. Especially in terms of, because I felt intuitively that that's life within me, and that's just obvious to everyone. And then I was like, well, people don't live as if it's obvious, and it's like, well, then I had to go through my own lesson to be humble before God, and that prompted me to a sense of wondering, but I guess I wouldn't have to wonder if I would be faithful to that, but then I would have to understand that that's God and how it is, but then I didn't, so I had to go through it to learn the lesson, and now I can live to tell the story. As long as I'm gonna live, I'm gonna tell the story in that sense. That's the intention. To deal justly in life, to be merciful, and to be humble. I mean, those three things in life, I learned that if we can focus on those three things, to be humble before God, God is the ultimate authority, there's no other God than that, and there's only one God. If the challenges happen, as they kind of bound to do, to be merciful, and the basis of it as a human life lived is being just, and just in a sense of to weigh things in the proper light, and don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't covet, and those kind of basic things which are the most important in that sense, because that is the basis of a good life. And from my perspective, even at the beginning when I started reading Bible, I couldn't the first challenge was like righteousness, because in my mind was like, oh, it's self-righteousness, so why do I want that, when I can experience that self-righteousness is part of the problem on the planet, because everyone, oh, I know, and I know better, and you know wrong, and it's like blaming each other, and we all kind of know better, and no one kind of have an ability to humble himself. And that's the difference between the self-righteousness and righteousness, which I kind of learned to distinguish. And the another thing is, like, what I'm speaking right now, I feel like was alive inside, but I didn't have words to describe it or to speak it out. And there might be different reasons, and might be different reasons for you as well. And I guess the part of what I'm kind of here and saying is to bring this hope that there is a way through, there is a way out, that it's possible to be more free, to walk with Christ, walk with God, and walk in righteousness. And it's weird, because affirming what's true doesn't strain you. It actually brings ease. And affirming what is not true, you have to strive and fight and struggle. And that's the weirdest thing ever, because once you are living in truth and affirming what is true and speaking the truth, it doesn't feel like a fight. And that's what kind of I didn't understand, because part of my mind felt like, well, it has to feel like a fight, because people say we have to fight because there's enemy, and it's like, yes, but it's a different sort of stance, at least to my knowledge at this moment. And again, I might be corrected on that, but yeah. And weirdly enough, I want to finish up with a story of a bowl of soup, which speaks to all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. So it's a distinction between you have an absolute freedom from God. There's nothing that you cannot do, but not all things are producing that good, happy, fulfilled life. And this distinction is like a cornerstone of understanding, because we all have a innate sense in life that we are something big, and then it's totally another story of what it means and how it is, because in a sense we are children of God, so we carry that essence within us, this potential, and maybe intuitively we know it, but then for that to be used properly is a different thing than for that to be flying around like a hose with too much pressure on it. And that's where self-control kind of comes in and kicks in, to be able to hone onto that power, for the lack of a better word, and distribute it and use it appropriately. And this word of all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial, is very, very crucial from 1 Corinthians 10:23. Because technically, you could go and do wrong. I don't advise it. I think it's a silly idea. Don't do it. And I'm going to use a small example of that. And I'm going to use it of example of a bowl of soup. Actually, that was a free bowl of soup, so maybe 3.5. I don't remember. But when I was 9 or 8, my favorite soup was tomato soup. And I remember at one point I was like so kind of wrapped up in, oh, that's really fulfilling and nice and amazing to have that soup, and it fulfills me, and you kid, you don't understand it. And it was like one time I ate 3 or 3.5 bowls of soup. I had more than I needed to, because it was so good. And well, long and behold, after 3.5 bowls of soup, I puked. That was too much. The body couldn't handle. It was too much, and didn't end up the other end, and it went up this end, and it was very unpleasant. It made me sick. It wasn't a pleasant experience, I remember. And since then, that was not my favorite soup anymore. And since then, I never had a need to overstuff myself, if that makes sense. And again, that's a gift from God. It's not because me, myself, of my own accord, oh, that's how I'm gonna be. It's like, it was a tandem, it was a dance together with the divine in that sense, as I see it, and not in the highest sense of like priesthood or whatever. It's just a simple human being sense of being a human. And the first was my body revolted, and I felt sick, vomiting, and so on. And weirdly enough, yesterday it came to me that was one of the most important lessons I remember from childhood. Because not only I didn't much suffer after that, oh God, why did this happen? I was just, okay, it happened as it happened, it was unpleasant, it was accepted. And straight away I had a lesson in it. The lesson was, don't overeat. Even the things that are good for you, if you overdo them, they're gonna end up in hurting you. And it made me always cautious next time when I was eating, not to overeat whenever I felt like, well, maybe you're gonna overeat. And it's like, I know where it's gonna end. And I know if I overeat, my stomach's going to belly hurt, and I'm going to vomit, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying I was like, I was absolute diligent student since there to follow that. But nonetheless, it feels like a jewel, because it feels like a piece of wisdom. Because I treated it as a gift. I seen it as a valuable lesson in life. Okay, this physical body has its limit. It can take 1 bowl of soup, maybe 2 if I'm really hungry, but definitely not more than that, and it's not worth overeating, because it doesn't bring anything of value, of substance. It just brings pain and vomiting, and it's not pleasant, and then the sensations, as in the throat and so on and so forth, they're not good for you. So and I observed there was a natural inclination to be kind of in balance in life, to not go one way or the other, to the left or to the right, if that's how you will. And it was, and in a way I feel grateful that God gave me that lesson, because how would I know? How would I know? Maybe in different circumstances I would be more prone to be like And I don't even remember that my parents say anything about not eating or overeating. It was just something that happened. And in Proverbs, it also kind of says that the fool kind of makes the same mistake, and even, the saying is that the definition of madness is to do the same thing and expect different result. So I didn't do it because to eat again the same amount of food would mean in my mind clear and straight that I will have the same result, which means same experience, which is unpleasant, which is undesirable, which I didn't want. So I didn't want to go there, so I didn't allow myself to go there, because there was a self-control not to let myself loose enough to be like, or not to be not present to what the body is doing to such a degree that it was allowed to do certain things. So I'm not saying I was perfect, because I was not. I did many silly and stupid things along the way. But I was reminded of that, and that beautiful gift it brought. And it's kind of the gift of unpleasantness. Because in the moment it felt kind of a bit embarrassing that I allowed myself. It was discomfort, and there was a negative side to it. Now I can see that the pleasant and unpleasant are part of life, and both are valuable if you can value it, if you can lord over it in a proper way. Because there was an experience, there was a childhood moment, there was a body signal, there was a quiet reminder that it won't end well, the overeating won't end well, and it will have the punishment, but the punishment will be to the body and to the experiences going through life, and that's not grace, and that's not joy, and that's not happiness, and it's not patience or kindness. And it was kind of like training, that life was training me, God was training me in that moment. And understanding that God's hand doesn't only bring, that God's hand can bring good results through temporary unpleasantness. The temporary unpleasantness is included in the bigger picture of wanting good things. And part of wanting good things is to, I don't know, I always had this sense of approaching the food in a sort of balanced way, and I did see it very valuable, because it's like, it's also feeding the body, overfeeding the body, then you've too much focus on the body and what the body is thinking. But then it helped me understand that not indulging the body with whatever it needs also brought something positive and good and helpful for the overall kind of life situation and life path. And kind of helped me understand between feeding the body and feeding the spirit in sort of way, and understanding that not allowing myself to overeat and to keep a low amount of food, in a sense. It was quite okay, and if the attention is too much on the body, then the body always wants something. There's always happening something in the body. There's always cells communicating, the organs, and so on and so forth. And the body has its natural needs, and if you provide for its natural needs, and then you know that that's enough out of wisdom, then the body is not overworked, and it finds its natural balance. And I know that overeating doesn't feel on the belly nice, because then it's like, oh, I feel over, and it's like, is that the pleasant experience of life to have? Well, no, it's not to me, in the sense. I imagine it's not pleasant to anyone, But I also was brought up in such a way that, oh, that's what we used to do. Like, oh, we used to eat a lot and then just rest, and it's like, oh, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, that's part of the experience, but then you realize, well, if I could eat less, a little bit less, then I wouldn't feel so heavy, and I wouldn't feel so heavy, I would feel more empowered, more balanced, and more centered, and I wouldn't waste that time to just moan and groan because I overate, because I could be like, okay, maybe just rest a little bit, but then the body feels okay, and then you can move on and enjoy more of life in a sense. That's how I understood it, at least. And I also understood that once the body settled and you kind of rest in that stillness and silence, which is closer to the soul, and there's a contentment in it. There's a sense of peace in it. Because, well, the body comes up, it has its need, it's fed, and then it's left alone, and then there's a peace in it, rather than trying to feed the body so you can't achieve permanent results with temporary means. Temporary means need temporary results, permanent needs need permanent results. So we have those two aspects of the soul and the body needs temporary means, but the soul needs permanent means. And I think it's this mixing of two between the soul and the body, and assuming that, well, I'm this, and I'm just the body, and not the soul. And again, that's going to be a totally different topic, but I'm just verging on that because it seems very important, that mixing of two together, that there's an intuitive sense of us being more than a body by the grace of God, having a soul which is immortal somewhere deep within, and have an intuitive knowing of that, and then not understanding that we live in this world through temporary body which has its own needs, and if we don't distinguish between those clearly, then we can mistake that we want to feed the immortal soul through temporary body, and that doesn't work. It never works, because it just doesn't work. So this soup story also was a clear story of cause and effect. I ate too much, I got sick, I learned that it was to not do it again. The issue I wanted to raise also is that it's not always so clear. The blessing of that experience was that it was so one thing after another, and there was a continuous attention on it, and I was just focused on it, because you don't have obligations. So I clearly, the mind comprehended, oh, I overate, this resulted in, rigid vomiting, and that was unpleasant, and I'm not going to do it again. It was clear. But amidst the challenges of daily life, when we have to do a lot of things, then we might not have that clarity to see clearly, okay, this caused that, and I'm not gonna do that because that's gonna lead to this, because there's so much thing. And I think part of the issue and part of the enemy strategy is actually to bring so many things that we can't handle it. Because in my own understanding, as the God kind of revealed it to me through my life, was that the body needs so much less things. Like we in life need so much less physical things than we think or give the credit to. But if you don't have that distinction between the physical and non-physical, between the physical and spiritual, and the God and the source, then you might want to satisfy the immortal soul, which is God's perfection. I'm not sure about that yet. I'm kind of working on it. You want to satisfy perfect soul with imperfect things, temporary. But then the perfect things in this world are the things of moderation. Not a thing is perfect, but the use of it in a wise way is more close towards perfection. So if you're using the food, the wise use of food is living in the God's law rather than this or that. But it's also that as well. It's so complex because God is so amazing. So He can create such a complex things with infinite wisdom. So it's perfectly balanced. But yeah. So the childhood memory of overeating soup turned out to be far more than a stomachache. It became a parable of Christian freedom. Yes, all things are lawful, and it was lawful to me to eat 3.5 bowl of soup. There was no God above me standing with, and just punishing me, which I feel like a lot of teachers now use that kind of attitude, which is not really fully coming from God in a sense, but then that's another story because in certain situations it definitely is. And even in the moments of discomfort or regret, God's grace is present, turning them into lifelong gifts of awareness. And that's certainly true, that if we're just humble enough, if we just empty enough of ourselves to be full of God and God's presence, then we can see it clearly. Then that means not closing your eyes, not closing your ears. And he who has ears, let him hear. And that exactly speaks to that. Because we often take things like, oh, I saw, I heard. And it's like, yeah, but it's actually ear which heard and the eye which saw. And I haven't created the eye and I haven't created the ear. God created it. So taking even claim of such a thing like, oh, I saw. Well, it's proper to use that in a manner of speaking, but it's not proper to use that in a technical way of how things are, because that doesn't give grace to God. And to give grace to God is like God created this body a little lower than angels, as it is written, He made humans. And the ear that God made can hear. And I noticed that if I take this attitude towards this body, then it doesn't produce wrongness, if that makes sense. And it's a clear way of approaching this body. It's odd because people don't usually do it, but then looking at what the world is and how it's behaving, then maybe we shouldn't accept all the things the world has to offer. Even though it seems true, and because everyone's doing it, and even to say that everyone's doing it is not correct. This is not a good excuse because not everyone is doing it. So even when I hear sometimes, well, everyone is doing it, like, isn't that already a lie? To say that everyone's doing it, everyone is drinking, everyone is partying in college, every politician is lying, every politician is dirty, every da, and it's like, can it be really true that every college student parties? Well, it definitely isn't. Maybe, even if something is a vast majority of people, it doesn't make it true and rule, because I'm not sure if it's possible to establish that in a human world at every, but that's a thought in itself. And the key here is not to learn just from this experience, but to be grateful for them, seeing even unpleasant parts of life as opportunities where God shapes us for good. And I'll leave it as that.